Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat sermon by TBA Rabbinic Intern Nico Losorelli.
When I was a child, the story of Noah and the flood was one of the first biblical stories that I remember learning. My dad sat my brother and I down on his bed with this facsimile of a painting in hand which depicted animals marching two by two into the ark that Noah had prepared for the impending cataclysm that was to be the flooding of the whole earth and the obliteration of all life that could not survive this catastrophe. I, of course, was much more interested in the animals themselves. I was and continue to be a lover of all things zoological, and was also super interested in the ark itself. How did all the animals fit on there? Where did they keep the food? If there are only two of each animal, how did they effectively, repopulate the world? And also, most importantly, what did the giraffe pen look like? It wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that the animals weren't being simply marched two by two, though that is what we find towards the beginning of this week's parsha. But the story actually goes on to feel as if it's somewhat contradicting itself in saying that only single pairs of impure animals should be brought, but 7 pairs of pure animals should be brought. And now after the animals come of their own accord to the ark, God fills the earth with a terrible flood. And all life, presumably excluding marine creatures, which is something I've always thought about, perishes. The storm persists for a period of 150 days, and then for another 40-day period, Noah, his family, and all the remaining life in this floating sanctuary waited to see if their period of waiting for the waters to subside was going to finally come to an end. At the end of those 40 days, Noah first sent out a raven, which flew to and fro until the waters had dried up. He then sends out a dove. The dove flies out, and then it returns because there's simply no place to rest his feet. Noah waits another 7 days and sends out the dove again, and lo and behold, the dove returns with an olive branch in its beak, which is truly another miracle, given that one might expect that even olive trees would have completely perished in the flood. Noah then knew that the waters had decreased on the face of the earth, and after another 7 days of waiting, he, his family, and all the storm-tossed creatures of the ark emerged to a world both destroyed and awaiting renewal. I, like many people, only remember the dove in this story. At least I did when I was a kid. It was a compelling image, as it is often depicted, a beautiful, pure, white dove returning with an olive branch in its beak, in a way snatching a familiar victory from the jaws of defeat and ushering in a new era of peace, hopefully. However, it wasn't until I was an adult that I remember relearning the story and noting the raven. While all this flying out and back of the dove was going on, it doesn't appear that the raven ever really returned. While the Gemara and the Midrash suggest that it might have either returned to the ark and had some sort of storybook dispute with Noah, who the raven suspected might harm its one and only mate, the Torah really never explicitly says that the raven returned. So does that mean that the raven, a land-dwelling bird, was flying for at least 8 days straight, if I'm doing my math correctly? How could this be? How could a raven possibly do such a thing, flying for so many days straight in a row? Well, what do we know about ravens? Ravens, like crows, are uniquely ubiquitous here in Southern California, and they are incredibly intelligent. They have demonstrated problem-solving abilities equaling those of some primates, and are known to build strong relationships with one another, other animals, and even humans. It's no mistake that they are clever, and to be an animal surviving and thriving in an urban environment such as Los Angeles, you just have to be clever. So, I don't believe that the raven flew around for 8 days straight. I believe it may have found a resting spot in the floodwaters, perhaps on some floating debris here and there, eking out a living until the waters receded completely. Because while the heroized dove flew out into the world searching for the familiar and returning to the safety of the ark when no such familiar safety was found, the raven flew out, looked down from its flight, at a world completely alien, destroyed, and transformed from what it formerly knew. Instead of looking down at that world and noting only the destruction, it looked down at that world and found all of the possibility, simply sitting there, floating on the surface of the water. It looked defeat in the eyes and said, I can make it through this. I can make something out of this, and I will live to fly another day. And this year and this upcoming week, we are not living in the world of the Torah of the dove. The world will never look like it once did, so we must live in the world of the Torah of the raven, looking down at a broken world and saying, this broken world is still so full of possibility. If only I can spread my wings and open my eyes to the possibility which is simply floating right there on the surface.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.